This question is from Sucheta Nadik. She asks, in light of your discourse on the differences in religious views, do you think it is practically possible to truly respect a point of view that opposes your own? I asked because a person of Christian faith probably wouldn't have found your talk respectful of his or her beliefs.
Okay, I'll start with the final point of the final point you made, whether a Christian would find it respectful or not. We have a tradition called Purva Paksha, which I'm carrying out here, which says you describe the other based on an authentic understanding of the other. And I have any number of Christian theologians. Maybe an average Christian is not well informed of Christianity. A lot of average Christians are not well informed of Christianity. I have at the back of the book an endorsement by Francis Clooney, Society of Jesus. He's a Jesuit and professor of religious studies at Harvard University. He's written about 10 books comparing Hinduism and Christianity, considered one of Vatican's experts on the subject. He has endorsed this book. He says this is a memorable book asking us to put aside modernity's tired categories and lazy comparisons, and at last to take seriously the Indian perspective on history and our world today. Being different is here a necessary virtue, essential to understanding our neighbors and ourselves. Much reflection and many a good argument should follow upon Malhotra's unique achievement. I feel when I have spent 20 years talking to real experts of the traditions on which I'm doing Purva Paksha, that is a clear indication that if somebody finds history centrism to be a problem for Christianity, then they may be calling themselves a Christianity, but probably don't understand it. So I would want them to go and I would want such a person to do a search on Nicene Creed, N-I-C-E-A-N, Creed, C-R-E-E-D, search. Nicene Creed is a creed that defines the core belief that every Christian is required to have, and Nicene Creed is read out and recited regularly in churches to kind of affirm what Christianity means. And Nicene Creed says, in the beginning there is original sin, then Jesus is born, virgin birth is necessary, he is the only Son of God, then he suffers for all of us through his crucifixion, and that is the only way we can be saved. Nicene, if you go to the official website of the Baptist Church, Methodist Church, Catholic Church, all the major denominations in the West, and my understanding of Christianity is through the discussions with people in the United States who are very Christian. Maybe what they're exporting here is slightly modified to fit the Indian sentiment, and they're accommodating. And maybe an Indian is not as clear on the real Christianity as the Western theologian understands. But if you go to the websites of all the major denominations, and if there is a search, you search for Nicene Creed, they will tell you that this is a creed, this is what it says, and this is necessary to be a Baptist or a Catholic or whatever. So my description of history centrism is in full compliance with the official description of Christianity by well-known and important authorities in Christianity.
Thank you. This is a question from M. Venkatesh. He asks, why is there no academic challenge to the corrupt Indian history books, which glorify invasions in the name of other religions and abuse Hinduism in the name of secularism?
Well, this is a problem we all deal with. Indian history books are, history first of all is history, but today history builds identity. So if you have a certain, if you want to pander to Dravidian identity, Dalit identity, Bengali identity of Christian, minority, Muslim, this, that, different identities, then every one of them creates their identity on a certain account of history. And therefore there is a contest. The contest of identities turns into a contest of histories. And so this vote banking, you want to appease a certain vote bank, so you want to put more of their view into the history textbooks. This vote banking has turned into a kind of circus in terms of what history you're going to teach. So the history is not in the hands of people who really know the history, but very political influence on history. And I don't know what the answer is. All I know is I live in the United States, and I've been an active person in trying to modify American textbooks' portrayal of Indian history and Indian spiritual traditions, which are pretty atrociously represented there. And it is a very serious fight, because unlike here, I don't know here if the history books are written at the state level or central level, but over there, every state has its own mechanism. So there's a big fight in every state. Now some of us have started contesting this. So these books evolved over a period of time, and to contest them and replace them will also take a period of time. But it's a very important point to start some activism in this area.
This is a question from Geeta Ramaswamy. What I gathered from your talk is a dharmic religion-centered Indian worldview. A whole section of our society is non-dharmic and pagan. Some tribes are examples. So what about their worldview?
See, I don't like the word pagan, because that's a Christian word for people who are, indigenous. Pagan means, I don't know if you even know what pagan means. Pagan means country bumpkin, means like some idiotic villager. That is what it means. It means country bumpkin, somebody who is not part of the established order. And so when the Christians took over native traditions, they would make fun of them by calling them pagan. That means that if you are not Christianized, you are just some country bumpkin. This is a pejorative. So how can you, in your question, on the one hand be wanting to champion these native traditions, and on the other hand use a pejorative term by calling them pagan? This is something you must research further. What is pagan? These are not pagan people. These are indigenous people, very much in the spirit of Dharma. Very much in the spirit of Dharma. Because if you read what this book calls Dharmic Civilization, it says every community has had its own darshana and its own visit from God or its own experience of God, typically goddess. Typically these native traditions. I have spent many years visiting Nagapattinam and living with the fishermen since 2005, so I understand every village has a goddess temple, which is, they got a unique name for the goddess. This is their goddess. This goddess is a past. There's a reason for this goddess. The next village got another one. This is the diversity exactly I am talking about. By dharmic civilization, I'm not talking about, a uniform code like this is the standard book and everybody has to follow. That is, in fact, not the dharmic tradition as we talked about. So I would say that so-called pagans of India are very much part of the dharmic civilization.
This question is from Amit Kumar Gupta. He wants to know whether there are any, like you said about the releases in Christianity and Islam. Is there anything similar in Hinduism as well? Like in the avatars of Vishnu, are there stories?
True. About in Hindu Dharma, also, there have been many of these revelations, many exemplars. The difference being that these are not considered exclusive. The difference being that a new revelation does not say go destroy, burn, finish off the previous ones to have your legitimacy. So we have some people who have a rat temple or a snake temple. The so-called, previous question, the so-called pagans, they have theirs. That's fine. Nobody has said that because I have a newer version, I should go delete all of those, uninstall them. Nobody says that. So the fact that new things keep happening, you could follow Ramana Maharshi, but then you don't have to negate some previous guy. You could follow, Krishna, but somebody else may say, I follow a more recent, enlightened person. And that's fine. So the exclusivity is the issue. And the exclusivity, I already explained, comes from history centrism, which our tradition is not. And the history centrism has to come up with something unique, absolute, exclusive in a particular account of history. And they come up with a theological argument, like I explained, virgin birth is necessary for the Christian system to have internal consistency. And this virgin birth happened only once because God believed in birth control or family planning had only one son. And so the fact that makes it exclusive. That makes it exclusive. I mean, if the doctrine were changed and said, God has many sons and daughters also, and so we're all God's sons and daughters, and so we're all that way, and none of us has this original sin in it, then the whole thing would disappear, the whole problem would disappear, but then the whole edifice of such a mighty institution would disappear.
This question is from Rajat Vasudevamurthy. He asks, what about Purva Paksha Siddhanta for social and societal structure? Like, for example, why can't there be a debate between socialism and democracy? Like,
Sure.
Why do they not?
Sure. I think this is a problem with the dharmic experts, and I'm very upset that when I go to gurus and acharyas and ask them, what is your Purva Paksha of, Western thought, Marxist thought, social sciences, postmodernism, they're not interested. They haven't worked that hard. It takes hard work. Our exemplars like Adi Shankara were very hard working. To go and understand the other took a lot of effort. So I want this to happen, but it's not happening. Now there's a difference between India and China in this regard. India was getting translated into the European languages, Indian thought. And therefore they were able to gaze at us, translate us to their way of thinking, and re-export it back to Indians, so many of us understand India through Western eyes. But China was doing the opposite. In Mandarin, they were translating. Every king in China was translating European thought into Mandarin. When Hegel would come up with some major position, they would translate it. When some British philosopher, French philosopher, German philosopher, they would translate it into Mandarin. So they were always doing Purva Paksha on the Europeans. And this is one reason they could not be defeated, because they were always understanding the European mind. And this is a problem we have, that we stopped the Purva Paksha tradition. I wanted the book to be called Purva Paksha, reversing the gaze at the West. But people in the publishing industry told me that, it'll limit the, scope and make it friendly and all that. But that's really what this book is, the Purva Paksha tradition.
This question is by Shiv. He asks, what can be done to counter inculturation?
Well, this book is exactly a response to that. Inculturation is when our people do not understand what is different. When our people are confused and do not understand what is hard, sharp difference, they do not know that they are being sold a bill of goods, that somebody is making it sound like everything is same. So if everything is same, then it doesn't matter whether I'm on this side of the line or that side of the line. The line doesn't matter even. So this sameness, which is what inculturation projects, the sameness is what leads to confusion, and it is the job of our spiritual teachers to teach what is our worldview and what it negates with confidence. You cannot have a philosopher or a scientist who is unwilling to refute and negate. You cannot have a mathematician who says, I will not refute a proposition because it's bad manners. You have to be able to take a stand and say that our worldview is not compatible with this particular point in the other worldview. That is it. They can continue. We're not forcing anything on them, but we have a certain worldview, and there is this difference. We should understand. Our people, having failed to do Purva Paksha on the West, and failed to establish what constitutes the core ideas of difference, which is why I'm writing this book, have therefore made us vulnerable to inculturation.
This question is from Joyshri Chanam. She asks, does Indianness mean Hinduism? Would you assume that people in the northeast states of India consider themselves Indians? Does the mainland India consider them Indians despite all the cultural and historical and also racial differences?
Yeah, the decision not to call it Indian civilization throughout this book, but to call it Dharmic civilization, is precisely for that. Because in India, there's also people who are theologically and philosophically part of the Western civilization. There's people who may be part of some other civilization. So India, I'm not denying that a Christian is not Indian or a Muslim is not Indian, but I am saying that Dharmic civilization, with its internal consistency, has a difference with respect to their civilizational difference, with respect to their civilizations. So yes, as a political entity, anybody with an Indian passport is an Indian. Anyone who becomes an Indian is an Indian by birth or by whatever means that is allowed. So my book talks about the difference between Dharmic civilization and Western civilization. There may be many Indians who are more Western than the Westerners. Many. I come from St. Stephen's College, and every time I'm here, they hold some reception in somebody's house, and I meet all my old friends, and they're all showing off who's become more Western and who knows this and who knows this, that, and I mean, the whole culture of the power structure is highly Westernized. I don't consider that to be part of dharmic civilization. They may have a Hindu name, but so what? Or they may want to be called Hindus by default because they don't understand anything, and they just sort of confused people. But my book is strictly a comparison of dharmic civilization with Western civilization, not a political book at all about Indians and so on.
Thank you, sir. There are a whole set of questions on what we can do, what can youngsters do, what can parents do, where does Purva Paksha start? So where should it start in school? So
Well,
what is the school education?
let's start with you, and then others. I want one thing from you. I want you to join a discussion group where this book is being discussed. The way you join the discussion group is, if you get the book, in the back there is a website. It's www.beingdifferentbook.com. It's not just beingdifferent.com, but beingdifferentbook.com. When you go to that website, there is a tab called Join the Discussion. So you're all technical experts. You just click, and it gives you a window to enter your email address and click Join the Discussion, and you will be made part of the discussion. That discussion is to these very ideas. It's understanding the book more Q&A, ongoing Q&A, so we don't stop here, we continue the Q&A. A lot of people with various projects, a lot of people with various ideas, you can join. So I'm using the internet as a kind of virtual community to really address these issues. And there are projects we want to do, such as translate into different languages. A gentleman here is going to translate into Kannada. We're going to get it translated into various other foreign languages. We're going to have it in smaller versions, PowerPoint and video, documentary, these kind of things. And then from these points of difference, we want to empower our acharyas of the next generation to go out and, as part of their teaching, be able to explain the difference with mutual respect, explain the difference to their gatherings in this manner. And then from my point of view, there's also work to be done in the West, because, Westerners are reasonable people. They're not, as individuals, they're not bad guys. It's not like every Westerner is a bad person. I have so many Westerners who support this work. They're saying, so many Westerners I know who are saying it's very important that you do this, very important. There are so many Christians I know who are revolting against the church. They're saying, I saw a banner somewhere which said, yes to Jesus, no to Christianity. Saw that. Yeah. Meaning the church is an institution, don't like it, but yes to Jesus. And they read in this book and saying, if it were not for the church, Jesus would be considered a rishi. And he would be considered rishi, so to them, this is a great book. For an internal debate within the Christianity. I'm being invited by theological institutes, theological seminaries where the Christians do research and teach the next generation of priests, to give a talk, give a seminar, and discuss this, because they are themselves questioning. So there are questioning people within the West who are open-minded. They don't happen to be in control of these institutions at this time. The control of these institutions are in the hands of people with power. But there are people who are on the fringes of power, but they are free thinkers, and they like this kind of discussion. So I feel that there's many avenues to take this idea forward into action, and I would like to welcome you to join this, and then we can continue.
This is a specific question from your book. This is from K.S. Kannan. You have said in your book that Bharatanatyam has been Christianized and yoga has been digested into Christian modes. Could you just give a picture of this situation?
Yeah, I have a lot of vocabulary I've introduced in this book, original vocabulary. One of them is history centrism, which I talked about, and so on. Another term I've introduced is digestion of one civilization into another. By digestion, I mean that like a tiger eats a goat, and the goat is the one who gets digested. It is not that the two merge and they're both equal. It's not like that. And I tell them that when a goat is digested, the tiger has a separate DNA, goat has a separate DNA. And the tiger cannot accept even a single cell of goat DNA inside his body. It will be toxic. So the goat has to be, as part of the digestion process, has to be broken down to the molecular level, and those molecules have to be broken into basic raw material so that it can be reassembled into tiger DNA. So the goat disappears and the tiger becomes stronger. It is not that after eating the goat, the tiger becomes mild and gentle like a goat. So this business that, they'll take us over, but it'll be good, we'll become part of them, and they will become mild like us. It doesn't happen. So the point is, if you look at history, the Western civilization and Christianity in particular have digested what the previous one question called pagan, which I don't like as a term, but let's say native traditions of Native Americans, American Indians. Europe, before it was Christian, was like that. They had goddesses, which Christianity didn't allow. They had so many different deities, which are all finished off. Christianity digested all these, took the Christmas tree came from so-called pagans. Easter came from pagans. I don't know if you know this. So many of the rituals, symbols, festivals are digested. What they could accommodate without compromising the history centrism. So they'll accommodate when a civilization is being digested. So Bharatnatyam language and grammar can be accommodated, but those stories are replaced by Christian stories over time. And yoga, the practices and techniques and things of that kind which are generic can be accommodated. And then this chakra becomes the Christ center. And I've lived there for 40 years, and the yoga ashrams, the yoga teaching places, yoga centers, for the first 20 years were very Hindu. And many of the yoga teachers had Hindu gurus in the 60s and 70s. But those guys, when they left, the Westerners became the gurus themselves. And then they started following what the client base wants. The client base doesn't want much Hindu stuff, all these things. So they started phasing that out. And there was a neutral phase when it was very secular. Now the latest trend is Christian yoga. The fastest growing form of yoga is Christian yoga. Almost every yoga center has some classes in Christian yoga, and they're the ones that get a lot of audience. Because the people who've gone into this yoga tradition feel guilty that they've betrayed their DNA. And they want to come back take this, digest it, bring it back into their DNA. And that DNA is the Nicene Creed, the one I explained, the history-centric Nicene Creed. So they want to map all this into the Nicene Creed so they can remain Judeo-Christian and also have the benefit of this. Now the problem from our point of view is that what is left of the goat? A pile of manure. Okay, so what is left of the Native Americans is there in museums, that this is the Native American, they did this dance, they were singing like this, they were doing that, exotic people, but not a living civilization. So when all the nutrients, when all the useful things that one has are sucked and digested and Christianized, then what is left? Praising me. He was coming to me, licking me, sniffing at me, checking me out, and he's invited me to be part of his, I can even go inside him. So, in a sense, it is a foolish thing, not because, you get rid of the difference, you become homogenized, you become remapped, reconstituted into another framework. So, I'm writing a book now, which will be coming out in 2012, called The U-Turn Theory, which explains the digestion in greater detail, and many, many examples of how digestions happen. And you will see that a lot of neuroscience and cognitive science in the West is studying yogis, Advaita Vedanta, theories of mind, theories of consciousness, Buddhists, and they are using this to upgrade neuroscience and upgrade cognitive science. And in doing so, it has become very fashionable. The first generation of such people were 20, 30 years ago. They would mention that this is Vipassana meditation we're going to do research on, or Maharishi's transcendental meditation, or Yoga Nidra. But then to get grants that would classify as science, they were told don't talk these things because now it's all considered some Eastern wisdom and spirituality, and that's not science. So they were asked to drop these. So they started dropping them and introduced a new jargon and a new vocabulary, replacing the Indian terms and removing their links, their personal links with the Indian teachers from whom they had learned. And now in the history of cognitive science, all kinds of modern terminology has been introduced, replacing the Indian words. And the pioneers are all Westerners. So you'll see Herb Benson is a pioneer, but actually he learned it from Maharishi, he learned TM. You'll see Stephen LaBerge. He took Yoga Nidra and he called it lucid dreaming. As a state of consciousness, lucid dreaming. And now there are many institutes of lucid dreaming that are teaching all this. And then you have John Kabat-Zinn, who has trademarked mindfulness meditation, and that's Vipassana. He learned it from his early books, talk about that. So I'm writing this U-turn theory to explain what happens when you get digested.